In 1998, the Comedy Channel aired the star's favorite Frasier episodes, and John Mahoney picked this episode as his. Hello, and welcome to the 21st installment of Frasier Fridays, where all the salads are tossed and all the eggs are scrambled. And hey, would you look at that? We're old enough to drink. Although you probably shouldn't do that, since this is a road trip episode. This episode is entitled Travels with Martin, and originally aired on April 14th, 1994. This is the only episode to air in April that year, and again does not have a direct Seinfeld comparison. Next week, Frasier is off, while Seinfeld returns with a double episode. There will be new episodes of both shows the following 3 weeks. Travels with Martin pulled in a mediocre 25.5 million viewers, a drop of 1.6 million viewers from last week, and a dip below the season average. We're well past Easter at this point, so this feels more like standard attrition than anything else. An interesting tidbit before we get into this week's episode. In 1998, the Paramount Comedy Channel had a special airing of Frasier episodes, where each of the 5 leads did a little introduction before what was their favorite episode of the series thus far. This episode aired as John Mahoney's favorite of the series. This week's episode is another James Burrows directed episode, and is written by a first-time writing team for us, Linda Morris and Vic Rousseau. This writing team will tackle 6 more episodes of the series, 3 each in seasons 2 and 3. The writing team has put together scripts for a handful of episodes for a lot of television series, including Welcome Back, Kotter, Alice, Life with Lucy, and Doogie Howser, MD. Like Rick Barron on direction last week, Rousseau and Morris aren't best known for their writing, and it was never their primary job. Rousseau actually got his start in 1976 as a stage manager on Family Feud before becoming a producer, along with his wife Morris, for a 24-episode stint on Alice. From there, the husband and wife duo would work as producers for Life with Lucy, Roomies, and all of Doogie Howser. They will also be executive producers for most of the first 3 seasons of Frasier. With production code 123, we're starting our episode with the blinking red dot intro. This is the 7th appearance of the red blinking dot, meaning it has now appeared a full 1/3 of the time, followed by 5 appearances apiece for the elevator and the lights all over the city intros, and a mere 4 appearances of the nothing happening intro. We open on a different kind of radio station scene. The show is already over for the day, and apparently the week, as both Roz and Frasier are taking the week off from the show for a well-deserved vacation. Obviously, there's no guest caller this week, since they're not broadcasting here, but what they do have, and what is quite interesting, is Frasier's vacation brochures. Yes, these are a thing that still exists today. In fact, I was looking at them at a welcome center at the state border crossing just the other day, but they're not that common. And it's not like anyone in their early 40s would have a stack of them to decide where they're going on vacation today. The internet has changed all of that. This gives the episode a somewhat dated feel, but it's not a big deal. The first place Frasier is looking at, and Roz mentions looks nice, is the Golden Door Spa. Unlike a lot of places mentioned in Frasier, the Golden Door is a real place. It's located in San Marcos, California, and the website doesn't even have prices listed. It's one of those places, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. With that said, it looks absolutely gorgeous, and I could easily see it being a place Niles, Frasier, or Maris would be interested in going to. The last thing from the opening I want to touch on is Roz talks about her mom again. Her mom still sounds like quite the character from everything we've heard about her, and for a minute, I really got my hopes up we were actually going to see Mrs. Doyle this week. Alas, not yet. My fingers are still crossed we'll get to see Roz's mother make an appearance on the show at some point in time. This whole episode is full of the unusual clothing choices for Niles, starting with his first shot, where he's talked Daphne into giving him a massage. In this scene, Niles is wearing suspenders. We've never seen this before, and this is also the only scene of the episode him or Frasier is sporting a tie for. More on this later. We get another excellent reaction shot this week, this one from David Hyde Pierce, as Leaves is giving him a massage. In the past, I've commented on David Hyde Pierce's reactions being a little more over the top than the others. I suspect this is largely due to his theatrical training. In this case, it's a bit more subtle than it has been in the past, and is excellent acting from the classical pianist. Niles mentions he has to move Maris's bags because last time someone else did, they broke 3 expensive bottles of Swiss lamb placenta. I don't want to get too much into this, as I think it's kind of a gross thing to make lotion out of, even if it does work. But I do want to note that Swiss lamb placenta lotion is a thing. And according to about half the reviews I read, it's a very effective wrinkle remover. It also comes in a pill form as a dietary supplement. And it's not that expensive in either case. Price aside, this does give us a better look at the kind of medicinal tools Maris likes to use. While Martin and Frasier peruse where they want to go on vacation, Niles' travel stories of Maris continue. And we learn she makes a yearly trip to her promised land, Dallas, where the first Neiman Marcus was founded. Like the Golden Door Spa, Neiman Marcus is a real store that was founded in 1907 in Dallas by brother and sister investing duo Herbert Marcus and Carrie Newman. The interesting thing is, this pair, along with Newman's husband Abraham Lincoln Newman, had come into $25,000, and they were trying to decide how they should invest it. Their choice ultimately came down to a choice between a new sugary drink that was completely untested, known as Coca-Cola, and starting a luxury clothing retailer. Obviously, they went with the clothing retailer. The store was an instant success and quite profitable. Unfortunately, in 1914, just 7 years after it opened, a fire destroyed the building and all the merchandise. A mere 17 days later, they reopened a temporary store, and by the end of the year had built a new flagship store, which would be the one our dear Maris is visiting here. This brings us into what is my favorite part of the episode. We get a super fun back and forth between Niles and Frasier, and Daphne and Martin, each with differing levels of success, trying to get another person to come along on the trip. I've always enjoyed contrasting back and forths like this, and it works great here. It's the highlight of the episode, and the only slightly negative thing I can say about it is the joke at the end, with Niles only agreeing to come once he learns Daphne's going to be there, was obviously where this was going from the very start. And just like that, we're on the road with the Cranes and Daphne. We've seen a couple car scenes before, but not that often. This is something else entirely. The interior of the Winnebago is its own set, and it looks pretty good for what it is. There is one cheap-looking spot worth pointing out. The world moving by in the outside rear window is clearly edited in after the fact, and kind of dances around where the window is. It's not near as bad as the early James Bond movies, where the driving scenes were something, to say the least. But the limitations for a driving scene on an early 1990s sitcom budget are largely in evidence here. Outside of that, the only thing from the opening of the RV scene I want to call out is Eddie keeps licking the dashboard. I know the actors used fish oil on their faces sometimes to encourage Eddie to lick them when the scene called for it, and I wonder if something like that accidentally got spilled here. Because Eddie licking the dash is clearly not one of the jokes, as no one on the show ever makes reference to it. The RV also brings us Niles' second unconventional clothing choice this week, and by far the most un-Niles-like one of the episode. Niles proclaims he's so inspired he's going to put on a baseball cap, then proceeds to put one on backwards. It's a look we've never seen from him before, and makes the normally somewhat stuffy Doctor seem much more relatable than he normally does. We've seen Frasier acting childish around his father before, but Niles has usually been more mature. This week, they both totally revert to being children. Considering Daphne is there, albeit sleeping, It feels a little out of character for Niles, but it's really funny. So I don't mind a slight lack in character judgment at all here. The travelers decide to get their picture taken with a live bear at Marvella's Souvenirs and Gifts. This is where we meet our first guest star of the episode, Marvella, played by Pamela Gordon. I wouldn't call Gordon a scream queen, but the actress has appeared in her fair share of horror projects, including Poltergeist 2, Subspecies 2 and Subspecies 3, The X-Files, and Tales from the Crypt. On the television front, she's appeared in The Wonder Years, Freaks and Geeks, ER, and a 6-episode stint on the Mark Frost detective series, Buddy Faro. She stayed active right up until her death in 2003, where she was working on a production of the stage play, Harvey. Before we move out of Marvella's gift shop, there's two other things I want to call out here. For the first time in the series, we have one of our leads wearing shorts, and it's John Mahoney. If I was a betting man, I would have said one of the women would be the first to wear shorts, but it turns out it's Martin. Between this and Niles' entire vacation wardrobe, this has been a very strange episode for clothing choices for most of the main cast. The second thing is the $10 picture with the bear. The exorbitant pricing aside, it stuck out as a bit of an oddity. The entire family ran out of the store without getting the picture. Do we actually need to see a member of the family hand over money and take the picture? Yeah, of course not. But if you'll permit me to backseat direct for a moment here, it would have been a much stronger choice to have the scene fade out with a few members of the family still in the gift shop. Then the assumption the picture was picked up could be made, as opposed to fading out with Frasier closing the door behind him, letting us know he didn't get the picture he just paid $10 for. This scene also introduced us to what is by far the most dated aspect of this episode, the border crossing. Up until 2009, so another 15 years after this episode aired, the US-Canadian border didn't require a passport to cross. In fact, from what I can remember crossing over pre-2009, there wasn't a lot of excitement that went with it at all. The patrol agents might have asked you what the purpose for your visit was, but otherwise, they just waved you through. Today, it's not too much more rigorous, but it does require a passport to get through. I say all of this to point out that in today's world, Daphne would have had to present a passport, and the whole plotline never could have happened. Which makes that part of the episode feel like an interesting time capsule into the pre-2000 world of the American-Canadian border crossings. The border guard is played by Don Amendolia. Amendolia is a "that guy who was in that thing" actor, who has appeared in a ton of television work, including a 5-episode stint on David Lynch's excellent Twin Peaks, all 13 episodes of Mama Malone, 3 episodes of both Night Court and Days of Our Lives, and a 7-episode stay on the soap opera Sunset Beach. He more or less retired from television acting in 2004, following appearances on a couple Law & Order shows. Today, he's pretty active with both Broadway and off-Broadway, and has been directing the off-Broadway production of Wicked and assisting with the workouts for the actors on the film Purple Rain. I've never had a Washington State driver's license personally, but if it's anything like the driver's licenses I have had, I don't think it looks like what Frasier hands the border guard during this scene. The paper he hands him as a driver's license is blank on the back and appears to be somewhat flimsy. Honestly, it might just be a business card. I'm not sure why this was used, but it feels like Kelsey Grammer should have just used his personal driver's license for this scene. We get 2 shots of the outside of the Winnebago, and look, I wish Burroughs would have cut these shots out because, to be honest, they don't look much good. I'm going to throw up a picture of the front of a real Winnebago and just let it speak for itself. In my mind, showing the front of this, even for these 2 brief shots, is James Burroughs' worst directing choice thus far in the series. It just looks janky. The episode wraps up with a coda that's Niall's home video of a sleeping Daphne. I was initially wondering if we get some new shots of the family with the bear, but I'm glad they did this instead, as I think it works much better. We only have 2 ties in the episode this week, and they're both repeats. Frasier's tie was last seen in episode 19, and is showing up for the 8th time here. Niall's tie is showing up only for the 3rd time, making its first appearance since way back in episode 8. This is the 7th episode in a row Frasier hasn't had a new tie, and the 2nd time Niall's hasn't. This episode is a little bit different from what we're used to. Part of that may be the writing team we had on board here. I'm not really sure, but both Frasier and Niles don't quite feel themselves a few brief times in the script. And not just because of the different clothing Niles is wearing, although that is definitely a part of it. With that said, I really enjoyed this episode, and I'd say it's in the stronger half of the series thus far. Although, unlike John Mahoney, I can't say that it's my favorite one of the series. The road trip idea is really good, and the execution is well done. If it wouldn't have completely cut Roz out of the episode, it might have flowed a little better to start the episode on the road trip and give us another stop with another guest star instead of the setup we got in the studio with Roz. With that said, I'm always happy for any scene time Roz is given, so I think it worked just as well doing it this way. The jankiness of the RV with both the front shot and the rear window are the only big complaints I have this week. As I mentioned a few times before, there's a couple little character choices that felt a bit odd, but never bad, and the finished product is a really good time. This episode ends up being a full ensemble episode, which is a nice change of pace, and everyone, except Roz, gets a chance to shine here. I love that Eddie and Daphne get to come on vacation, and David Hyde Pierce is the MVP of reaction shots this week, with his face while Daphne is giving him a massage. If you want to check out John Mahoney's favorite episode, and see some whooping cranes to boot, give this 7.5 out of 10 episode of Frasier a watch.